Welcome, everybody. Thank you for returning to our next segment of our YouTube series, MultiChartsPlatform.net, which is a free platform with AMP Futures. In the first segment, we covered pretty much how to log into the actual platform, download and install the software, get user credentials to log into the actual platform, whether you're trading live or demo. And this next series, we're going to cover how to basically create workspaces. And workspaces is going to be an integral part of how you utilize MultiCharts platform on a day-to-day basis. It's very important to understand how to use workspaces because this is something that you're going to have to create on a day-to-day basis, or if you have multiple workspaces and different layouts, it is important for you to understand how to create different layouts and how to organize your workspaces. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes or so just to kind of give you a brief walkthrough in terms of how to manipulate and create workspaces. So the first thing, as you can see, we are logged into the platform at the moment, and you will see at the bottom of your chart here, there are these tabs that you'll see. So as I mentioned in the previous video, we create these pre-populated built workspaces that they are automatically created for you when you log into the actual platform for the very first time. So what we're going to have to do is, if you don't want to use the specific layout that we see at this very moment, what I'm going to do is actually going to close out these workspaces. So I'm going to simply right-click on the tab at the bottom here, and I'm going to right-click and just close the workspace. And then I'm going to hit no. I don't want to save the workspace. So again, these workspaces that I'm closing out are the pre-built workspaces that AMP creates for our customers. You may or may not want to use the workspace, so I'm just going to go ahead and just delete the workspace as if you're logging into the platform with no workspace present. All right, and now this is what a blank workspace looks like. So if you notice now at the bottom here, you don't see any tabs, which means that there are no workspaces present. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to go to File, and then we're going to go to New, and we want to go ahead and select Workspace. All right, so now what you can see there's been a tab that's been created. So now if I right-click at the bottom tab here, if I rename it, I can rename the workspace anything I want. So for example, I'll call it AMP. All right, now the AMP workspace has been created, and now the next step is you're going to go on and start creating your layout. So we're going to cover the different functions throughout the series in terms of what these functions are, but right now we're just focusing on the workspaces. And I'm going to get into the next video series that we do. I'll explain what these desktop functions are, which is pretty cool as well. But let's see if I want to create another workspace. So for now, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to go to Workspace here. And now I'm going to go ahead and rename the workspace AMP1, for example, or what's better, you'll call it AMP2. All right, so now I could tab the tab, and I can have independent workspaces. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and create, let's say, a simple chart here. I'll go to File, New Chart Window, and I'm going to go ahead and just scroll up and just select the market that I want to add. So let's say EPM16. That's the mini S&P. All right, we'll wait for that data to load. And then I'll go to the second workspace. So now that chart has been created, I'll go to the second workspace. And if you notice, the second workspace is still a blank workspace. So I can tab to tab between workspaces. All right, so now if I want to open up another chart, let's say a different instrument this time, File, New Chart Window. And I still got I just downloaded and installed this platform just the other day, so I have to update some of the symbols here. So the mini Dow, for example. I'm going to add that real quick. And we're going to get, I don't mean to go through these things that I'm not showing and demonstrating and explaining, but right now I'm just explaining the workspace segment. So we'll get into into a deeper look in terms of how to add symbols as I just done, how to delete and organize the symbols. That will be for a different video presentation. So for now, let's just go ahead and add a mini Dow chart. All right, and then now you have your mini Dow chart. So if I go back to the AMP workspace, you can see that's the mini S&P chart. And if I go to the second workspace, that's the mini Dow chart. So this gives you the capability, if you want to be able to separate out the different workspaces for different purposes. For example, I've seen customers where they'll have 10 different workspace tabs at the bottom, and maybe perhaps they'll have the 10 different markets that they trade, and each tab will represent that specific market that they'll trade, and that workspace will compile and basically include anything that's involved in relation to that market. That's one way I've seen customers organize the different workspaces. Or you can even do this, like for example, if you want to be able to tab the tab. So in this case, if you're looking at the mini Dow chart, I'm going to rename this workspace by right-clicking on the tab at the bottom there. I'm going to rename, and I'll just call it, for example, YM 15 minute. Oh, we'll just do YM, for example. So we'll just keep it simple, YM, and then I'll just rename this tab ES. All right, so this is now two different workspaces for two different markets. Now, anytime, again, if you open up any function within that specific workspace, it is independent from each other. So what I mean is if I open up, let's say, a DOM, right, so here's a DOM. Now, if I minimize that, if I go to the YM workspace, notice the DOM does not pop up. But if I go back to the ES workspace, you see how the DOM pops up. So you can see that's independent from each other. So the advantage of this, again, is if you have, if you don't have the luxury of having multiple monitor displays, you only have one monitor display, it will be very beneficial to create as many workspace tabs at the bottom there. So therefore, you can use your one monitor and tab to tab and manipulating and choosing different workspaces that you have created. And that pretty much is a quick summary of how to create different workspaces. Again, you'll go to File, New, Workspace, and that's going to allow you to create as many workspaces. And you want to right-click on the tab and rename it. And you can rename the workspace anything that you wish. So in this case, NQ. Let's add another one, File, New, Workspace, and then we can call this one TF, for example, the Mini Russell. And now you can start creating your tabs. If you don't want the tab to be displayed at the bottom, there is a way you can actually go, if you right-click on the tab and go to Tab Settings, you can actually have the tab show up on top instead. So instead of it being on the bottom, you can see there it's at the top. And another thing, too, that I want to point out, I personally like the tabs at the bottom, so I'm going to bring it down back to the bottom by right-clicking on the tab, go to Tab Settings, and it's going to show on bottom. And what I would recommend doing, if you do have multiple workspaces open, as I've created here, every time you launch MultiCharts, if you want all those workspaces to pull up, what you're going to want to do is go to File, and then Preferences, and then you'll see under the Workspaces tab here, you'll see an option Open Last Active Workspace from Previous Session or Open All Workspaces from Previous Session. So right now, the middle selection has been applied because I have multiple workspaces, so I do want to make sure that I have that selection enabled. So therefore, when I log back into the platform the next day or the next time I log into it, it's going to bring up all the workspaces that I've created, even if I have multiple workspaces. So therefore, you don't have to go to File, Open Workspace, and manually select each workspace one by one, which is going to take more time. And this is pretty much a simple breakdown of how to manage the workspaces. In the next segment, we're going to go over desktops, and I'll explain the differences between desktops and workspaces. But mainly, the main thing that you're going to want to do first, if you're not looking to use the pre-built workspace that AMP created for you when you first log into the platform, then it would be recommended to go and start creating your own workspaces. Again, to close the workspace, you can always right-click on the workspace, close workspace. There's also a tab as well that allows you to close all workspaces. And it'll always ask you anytime you make a change to a specific workspace, and if you're about to close it, it'll always ask you, are you sure you want to save the changes? And of course, if you want to save the changes, you want to hit yes. If not, then just hit no. And then what happens, well, basically you've eliminated that workspace. And so the next time you log into the platform, that workspace will not be there anymore. So I would recommend anytime you make changes to your workspace, if you want to make the changes, make sure you hit yes to the prompt when it asks you, do you want to save the changes to the workspace? Otherwise, hit no. Or let's say if you made changes and you are not satisfied with the changes and you'd rather revert back to the previous changes or settings, then just make sure you hit no when it prompts you, do you want to save the changes you've made? And that pretty much concludes the simple segment here on Workspaces. In our next series, we're going to cover the desktop function, which I'll explain the difference between desktops and workspaces. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.